Joining me now is Congressman Jamie Raskin. He led the second impeachment trial of Donald Trump, served on the January 6th House Select Committee, and he is now the ranking Democrat on the House Oversight Committee. It's so great to be here with you this afternoon, and Happy New Year to you as well. I wanted to start, Congressman.
Happy New Year to you, Jen. Thank you.
Yes, absolutely. Well, I wanted to start, Congressman. I mean, it's so important, in my view, to call out the craziness, even when we feel numb to it at times. And when you hear Trump call the insurrectionists hostages, as he's repeatedly done this weekend, going as far as to say President Biden should release them. You were in the Capitol that day. You've spent the last few years working on this. How dangerous is this rhetoric? And what can be done, in your view, to counter these attempts to kind of rewrite history of that day?
Well, obviously, it's a major insult and affront to the families of actual hostages still being held by Hamas in Gaza right now. But look, something struck me yesterday. It was sort of the dog that didn't bark. The Republicans released hundreds and hundreds of hours of TV security tape from January 6th. They've had months to examine it. They have not come up with a single shot which purports to capture an Antifa fighter or an FBI agent inciting the insurrection. Nothing. And yet they're still out there spreading their propaganda and disinformation about how it was really Antifa and FBI agents, which, of course, would make it strange to argue that all these people should be released and Trump's going to pardon them. Why would he want to pardon all these Antifa fighters? So there's no logic in their presentation. It really is characteristic of what you get from authoritarian and fascist political parties.
No question. And there's no logic really in Trump's argument here other than politics, right? But I mean, he is accusing Biden of being a threat to democracy. And that projection, which you and I both know is crazy, and probably everybody watching know is crazy, it's kind of working with his base. How do you combat that? Do you need to combat that? Should we all be combating it?
Yeah, well, look, they've wrecked the Republican Party. When the Civil War started, Lincoln said that insurrection is the negation of the basic principle of democratic government, which is the people get to choose their own rulers. And they have ruined the Republican Party. It started as an anti-slavery, pro-freedom, pro-immigration, anti-know-nothing party, and they've reduced it to a cult of authoritarian personality where Donald Trump, even yesterday, is engaging in what is essentially pro-slavery, anti-union rhetoric, saying that Abraham Lincoln could have avoided the Civil War by accepting the so-called Crittenden Compromise, which was a pro-slavery compromise that would have constitutionalized slavery for all time. And this is what they've done to the Republican Party. So it's true he's got this, I'm rubber, you're glue strategy that when Joe Biden and the Democrats call them out for the authoritarian collapse of their party, they say, no, it's you attacking democracy. And we just have to go out and educate America about what actually has happened and trust in the good common sense of the people that they will recognize in Joe Biden, an honorable public servant who's been devoted to the common good his entire life, versus Donald Trump, who is a huckster, a ripoff artist, a compulsive liar, and a danger to the republic.
A huckster is such a good name, and I think there's no question that speech on Friday was intended to do exactly that. I also, since I have you here, I wanted to ask you about kind of some big news. There's a lot of big Supreme Court news this week, but the big news about the 14th Amendment. And it's understandable, I mean, in my view, I'm sure in yours as well, to be skeptical a bit of the Supreme Court, given a number of their rulings. But they have ruled in cases related to Trump, kind of against him in a number of scenarios, including ones about the release of documents, et cetera. How confident are you, and should people be, that they can be impartial in this 14th Amendment case, given there isn't really historic precedent, but that's the point of them facing it?
Well, it's true that the court has ruled a few times against Donald Trump. The arguments he advances are so outlandish and egregious that even the people on the court who he thinks owe him do not want to completely disgrace themselves. And I hope it would be the same way with Section 3 of the 14th Amendment. This is a case of major importance to the future of democracy in America. And the Constitution is clear, just like you've got to be 35 in order to be president, just like you have to be a native-born U.S. citizen, even though that's going to disqualify a lot of otherwise qualified people like Jennifer Granholm or Arnold Schwarzenegger. Also, you cannot have engaged in treason, and there are, or you cannot have engaged in insurrection or rebellion. There's probably fewer than a dozen people who have essentially disqualified themselves because of their actions on January 6th, and that's far more morally justifiable than just saying, you know, Maxwell Frost or AOC can't run for president because they're too young. But these are the qualifications we have, and I hope that the Supreme Court will do their essential job just by reading the text of the Constitution, understanding what the original purposes and meaning are, and then implementing it, because I haven't seen any serious argument advanced that Donald Trump did not participate in insurrection on January 6th. On the contrary, he was really the mastermind and the ringleader of the whole thing.
It's so hard to get into Trump's mind. I don't try to do it too often, but it seems pretty clear that he has been trying to pressure the court in some ways. I mean, he said in the wake of the news, quote, "I just hope we get fair treatment. If we don't, our country is in big trouble." I mean, do you hear that as attempts to intimidate the justices or pressure them, or how should we be hearing that?
Yeah, I mean, you know, already you can hear in the right-wing media about how Justice Kavanaugh owes him and they all owe Donald Trump. I mean, that is a mobster form of justice where it's not important what the law says, but what's important is which judge you know. And that, of course, is an essential attack on the rule of law and the idea that we're governed by the Constitution as the supreme law of the land. They're just saying these people who Trump put on the court owe him. You know, I think there's been a very coherent argument made already that Justice Thomas needs to recuse himself because he's obviously biased by virtue of his wife's participation in the insurrectionary politics of January 6th and the weeks leading up to it. And in an ideal world, you would have a justice who would be able to recognize that. This court does not accept any binding ethics regime where they would turn it over to other judges to determine whether or not they're acting in an objective way.